The special daughter of the millionaire couldn't write until the millionaire hired a poor babysitter. Coming home early from work, he froze upon discovering what the babysitter taught his daughter to write. The Davenport estate rose like a fortress of marble and glass, silent and imposing under the grey sky of a dragging afternoon. Inside, in the sumptuous office where the scent of leather and mahogany mingled with the faint aroma of single-origin coffee, Richard Davenport watched the fine rain trace winding paths on the window pane. Every drop that trickled down seemed to mock his stillness. On his wrist, a gold watch marked not just the hours, but the rhythm of an empire built with discipline and calculated coldness. He was a man who turned minutes into millions, a master of the business universe, where his name was synonymous with success. His vast and growing fortune was a testament to his skill in navigating the stock market, turning investments into a net worth most couldn't even dream of. But here, in this oppressive silence, none of that mattered. The only balance sheet that haunted him wasn't that of his financial assets, but of his own life. On the desk, next to a laptop displaying bullish stock charts, lay a crumpled piece of paper. A child's drawing, with hesitant lines, showed two figures. One, tall and rigid, dressed in a pinstripe suit. The other, small, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was a gift from his daughter, Lily, 7 years old. A gift that was also a sentence. Next to the drawing, a frustrated attempt to write "Daddy." The letters were just disconnected scribbles, an indecipherable code that echoed the chasm between them. Lily was the light of his life, a sweet girl, full of a disarming tenderness, but her mind operated on a different rhythm. A developmental difference prevented her from translating her thoughts into written words, a barrier that all the money in the world seemed incapable of breaking down. Every private tutor, every renowned specialist who had walked through those doors, left with the same look of pity and an exorbitant check. Every failure was another brick in the wall that separated him from the one person whose love he desired above any profit. The soft chime of the intercom broke his melancholy. It was his assistant, Clara, her voice always polished and efficient. "Mr. Davenport, the last candidate for the nanny position has arrived. Should I send her in, or shall I reschedule for tomorrow?" Richard sighed, the exhaustion heavy on his shoulders. There had already been 3 interviews that day, 3 women with impeccable resumes who spoke of advanced pedagogical methods and promised miracles. None of them had even managed to draw a smile from Lily. "Send her in, Clara. Let's just get this over with." He leaned back in his chair, adjusting the knot of his tie, preparing his armor of indifference. He expected another professional who would see his daughter as an intellectual challenge, a project to be fixed. The door opened and a young woman entered, hesitant. Her clothes were simple, a faded floral dress that contrasted violently with the surrounding luxury. Her shoes were worn, and she clutched a cloth tote bag with both hands, as if seeking some security from it. Her name was Anna. There was nothing in her appearance to suggest the competence he was looking for. She seemed fragile, almost lost in that environment. Richard was already forming the polite dismissal in his mind, a speech that had become routine. He looked up, ready to end the interview before it even began, but his gaze met hers. There was something there, a disarming sincerity, a calm that didn't belong in that place. And for a moment, a single, inexplicable moment, he saw in that young woman's eyes the same sweet glimmer he saw in his daughter's. He fell silent, the dismissal dying on his lips, a strange and unexpected curiosity preventing him from sending her away. Richard cleared his throat, trying to re-establish the formality that Anna's gaze had shattered. "You have no experience with children who have specific needs," he stated, the sentence sounding more like a fact than a question. His voice was the same one he used to seal million-dollar deals, precise and devoid of emotion. He expected the young woman to be intimidated, to stammer an excuse and facilitate the end of their conversation. But Anna just nodded, a gentle movement of her head. "No, sir, I don't have certificates or degrees that say I do," she admitted with a calm that disarmed him again. "What I do have is patience, and I know that every child, without exception, speaks the language of kindness. Sometimes, we just need to learn to listen with our hearts." The simplicity of the answer hit him in an unexpected way. In a world governed by data, profits, and dividends, the idea of listening with your heart was as foreign as it was inefficient, and yet he found himself unable to dismiss it. He pressed a button on the intercom. "Clara, please bring Lily in." Minutes later, the door opened again, and Lily entered, holding the assistant's hand. Her large, expressive eyes were fixed on the floor. She looked like a little fairy lost in a cold castle, her pink silk dress contrasting with her withdrawn posture. Upon seeing her father, she ran and hid behind his legs, peeking at the stranger in the floral dress with suspicion. Richard felt the familiar pang in his chest, a mixture of protective love and helplessness. All the previous nannies had tried to approach her with forced smiles and invasive questions, which only made her withdraw further. He expected the same reaction now, but Anna didn't move toward her. She remained where she was and slowly knelt, bringing herself to the girl's level. She said nothing. She just took a drawing pad and a small box of colored pencils from her tote bag. She opened it to the first page and, with a red pencil, began to draw a heart. Lily, curious, took a step forward. Her eyes followed the movements of Anna's hand. After the heart, Anna drew a flower with clumsy petals and a crooked stem. Then she looked up at the girl and smiled, a genuine smile, without any trace of professionalism or pity. "Do you like flowers?" she whispered. Lily didn't answer with words, but her eyes lit up and she took another step, letting go of her father's leg. Anna held out a yellow pencil to her. "How about we draw a sun to warm up our flower?" Hesitantly, Lily's small hand reached out and took the pencil. Together, without Anna forcing the movement, their two hands guided the pencil across the paper, creating a vibrant yellow circle in the corner of the page. Richard watched the scene, frozen. It was the first time he had seen his daughter interact with a stranger of her own free will. Against all logic, against every business instinct that told him to analyze the risks of this human investment, he made a decision. "You start tomorrow," he said, his voice lower than he intended. Anna looked at him, surprised. "Actually, if it's not a problem, I'd like to start now," she replied. And before he could protest, she turned her attention back to Lily. "What do you think? We could sing a song while our sun shines." That afternoon, Richard tried to get back to work. He sat in his chair, turned on the monitor, and stared at the numbers that represented his vast net worth. But his mind couldn't focus on the cash flow or the profitability of his investments. His ears were tuned to the sounds coming from the playroom. First, a tense silence. Then, the low sound of a nursery rhyme, a simple melody he vaguely remembered from his own childhood. And then, something happened. A crystalline sound, pure and completely unexpected, echoed through the silent corridors of the mansion. A sound he hadn't heard in so long he almost didn't recognize it. It was Lily's laugh, a loud, genuine peal of laughter, full of an impossible joy. Richard froze, his hand hovering over the mouse. His heart, hardened by years of formality and disappointment, gave a painful leap. He stood up, the crypto report forgotten on the table, and walked toward the door, moved by a force he didn't understand. He had to see. He had to be sure that sound was real. He stopped in the doorway, hidden by the shadow of the hall, his heart beating a frantic rhythm against his ribs. What he saw made him hold his breath. The playroom, usually a museum of expensive dolls and untouched educational games, was transformed. Anna and Lily were sitting on the floor, on a plush rug, surrounded by sheets of paper scattered like a field of snow. There were no books, no apps on tablets, none of the rigid methods the previous tutors had insisted on applying. What there was a colorful and joyous mess. Anna wasn't teaching the alphabet in a linear fashion. She had turned it into a game of guessing and affection. With a blue pencil, she drew a wave on the paper. "What does the ocean make, Lily?" "It makes a W for a wave." And then she tickled the girl's belly, who squirmed with pure laughter. For the letter H, she drew a heart and said, "H for hug," and then wrapped the girl in a tender embrace. Richard felt a pang of something he couldn't identify. It wasn't envy, it was deeper. It was a kind of grief for all the lost time. He, the man who understood the fluctuations of the stock market and predicted the movement of international capital, felt emotionally illiterate in the face of that scene. He had spent a fortune on specialists, invested in cutting-edge therapies, all to try to fix what he saw as a problem. But Anna didn't see a problem. She saw a child. And she was simply talking to her in the only language Lily understood. The language of love. He remembered the last tutor, an austere woman with 3 degrees, who had tried to force Lily to hold the pencil correctly, resulting in a stifled cry and another closed door. Now, his daughter's little hand held a green crayon firmly, not because she was instructed to, but because she wanted to be part of this magical game. He watched for a few more minutes, fascinated. Anna began to hum another nursery rhyme, a sweet, old melody, as she drew a simple house with smoke curling from the chimney. "This is our little house," she said softly, "and every little house needs a door, so Daddy can come inside." Lily watched her, her eyes shining with concentration. Richard felt his throat tighten. He was the reason that this luxurious house often felt empty. His long hours at the office, securing a solid financial future, but creating a hollow present. His business was his priority. The management of his assets consumed his days. But what was the point of so much effort if the most valuable treasure in his life seemed to be locked in a vault to which he didn't have the key? Deciding he had hidden for long enough, he took a step into the room, clearing his throat lightly to announce his presence. Anna looked up, and her smile didn't waver. There was none of the nervous subservience he was used to seeing in his employees. There was only a welcoming serenity, but it was Lily's reaction that paralyzed him. Instead of shrinking away or running behind him, she turned, her eyes glowing with pride, and held up the paper with the drawing of the house. "Daddy!" she said, the word coming out clear and firm. It was a sound he rarely heard, and never with such confidence. He knelt, the expensive fabric of his trousers creasing on the floor, and took the drawing. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. It's the most beautiful drawing I've ever seen." In that moment, he wasn't a multi-millionaire, he was just a father, overflowing with an emotion so overwhelming it left him speechless. Later, as night fell and Anna prepared to leave, a different kind of quiet settled over the mansion. It wasn't the cold silence of before, but a serene calm. Richard walked her to the door, a formal thank you on the tip of his tongue, but the words seemed inadequate. When the door closed, he noticed she had forgotten her drawing pad on a table in the foyer. He picked it up to put it away. As he flipped to the first page, he saw the drawing of the sun and the flower they had made together earlier. And then his heart stopped. Below the drawing, almost imperceptible, was a letter, a single letter, traced with a trembling, hesitant hand, but unmistakable. It was the letter A, the first letter his daughter had ever written in her entire life, and next to it, like an echo of her own attempt, a tiny heart. The days that followed were like waking from a long winter's sleep. The mansion, once a mausoleum of echoes and formalities, began to breathe. The most common sound was no longer the austere ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, but Lily's laughter, which seemed to sprout from every corner. Richard would find himself pausing in the middle of an important call about the fluctuation of the euro, just to listen to the melody of a nursery rhyme coming from the garden. Anna didn't follow a schedule. Her lessons happened in the kitchen, amid flour and eggs for making cookies, where O was for oven and E was for egg. They happened in the garden, where T was for tree and B was for bird. Each letter became an adventure, a sensory discovery involving smells, tastes, and textures. Learning ceased to be a task and became a natural consequence of joy. Richard, the man whose life was governed by logic and data analysis, found himself in unfamiliar and fascinating territory. He started coming home earlier. The excuse was always the same. He needed to check some urgent emails, but the truth was that he was drawn to this new atmosphere. He would stand in the kitchen doorway, watching Anna and Lily with their hands covered in dough, singing as they shaped cookies into letters. On one of those afternoons, Anna saw him and smiled, holding out a piece of dough in his direction. "Wouldn't you like to make an RE for Richard, sir?" she asked, with a naturalness that disarmed any protest. He, who only handled luxury pens and million-dollar contracts, suddenly found himself with his hands covered in flour, trying to shape the initial of his own name under the amused gaze of his daughter. And when Lily clapped for his clumsy R, he felt a kind of profit that no investment had ever provided. However, this new dynamic did not go unnoticed. One evening, during a business dinner at his own home with partners and investors, the conversation inevitably turned to Lily's education. Richard mentioned, with restrained pride, the progress she was making. "I've hired a new tutor. She has different methods," he said, avoiding too much detail. Arthur, an old friend and partner whose wealth rivaled his own, laughed with disdain. "Different how, Richard? I hope you're not wasting your money on these new alternative therapies. Children like Lily need structure, renowned specialists. You have the capital to hire the best in the world. Don't tell me you're settling for less." The mockery was subtle, but sharp, and it hit Richard at his most vulnerable point, his pride. He felt a flush rise to his face, doubt slithering in like a snake. Was he being naive? Was he trading proven competence for the seduction of fleeting joy? The final blow came from where he least expected it. The headmistress of the elite private school where Lily was enrolled, an institution attended by the heirs of the country's greatest fortunes, called for an urgent meeting. Ms. Thompson was an intimidating woman, with a gaze that seemed to calculate the net worth of every parent who walked through her door. "Mr. Davenport," she began, her voice as cold as the marble of her desk, "we're concerned about Lily. We've noticed a regression in her behavior. She's more distracted, hums at inappropriate times, and refuses to follow the structured methods we use. I've been informed that you hired a new caregiver. I'd like to know what her credentials are." Richard hesitated, Anna's simplicity seeming absurdly inadequate in that environment. "She doesn't have a traditional background," he began to explain. Miss Thompson cut him off with a condescending smile. "I see. Inappropriate methods, as I suspected. These well-meaning but unprepared individuals can cause irreparable harm. They confuse affection with education. I suggest you reconsider this hire for your daughter's sake. Our school's reputation depends on the success of our students." He left the meeting stunned, the headmistress's words echoing in his mind. Irreparable harm, inappropriate methods. The social pressure, the weight of his circle's expectations, fell on him with full force. The world he knew, the world of business, logic, and measurable results, was in direct conflict with the world of laughter and letter-shaped cookies that Anna had created. He arrived home with a heavy heart, the decision to fire her forming in his mind like an inevitable storm. It would be the sensible thing to do, the responsible thing. He had to protect his daughter. As he entered, silence greeted him. Strange. Normally, at this hour, the house would be filled with music. He walked to his office, the door ajar, and stopped. The scene that unfolded before him made the world stop spinning. Lily was sitting at his massive mahogany desk, in his imposing leather chair. Before her, a sheet of paper, and with a concentration Richard had never seen before, her little hand guided a pencil, letter by letter, shaky, imperfect, but undeniable. She was writing by herself, and when she finished, she held up the paper, her eyes shining with the greatest of achievements. Richard approached, his heart in his throat, and read the words his daughter had just written for the first time. "I love you, Daddy. Thank you for being so amazing." Hot, unfamiliar tears welled up in Richard's eyes. He, the man of steel, the billionaire who traded fortunes in euros and dollars without blinking, felt his legs grow weak. That piece of paper in his hands weighed more than all the gold bars he kept in Swiss vaults. Each shaky letter was a priceless treasure, an inheritance of love that no amount of money could buy. He slowly knelt, the world of business, stocks, and interest rates dissolving into a distant hum. All that existed was his daughter's radiant face. He pulled her into a clumsy, strong hug, burying his face in her fragrant hair. "You did it, sweetheart. You did it," he whispered, his voice choked by a sob that tore through his chest. Lily hugged him back, tightening her little arms around his neck, not understanding the depth of her father's emotion, but feeling his love like a sun warming her from within. When he finally pulled away, his eyes met Anna's. She was standing at a respectful distance, a serene smile on her face. In her gaze, there was no triumph, only a silent sharing of that joy. The intention to fire her, the conversation with the headmistress, the pressure from his friends, it all seemed ridiculous, coming from a parallel, meaningless reality. How could he have doubted? How could he have even considered trading this miracle for the approval of a world that understood nothing about the true value of things? He wanted to say thank you, but the word felt poor, an insufficient payment for such a grand gift. Instead, he just nodded, a gesture laden with a gratitude that echoed in every fiber of his being. In that instant, the relationship between them changed. She was no longer just the nanny. She was the architect of his happiness. Later that night, Richard was in his office, but he wasn't working. The computer screen showed a significant increase in the profitability of his investment funds, but he barely noticed. His gaze was fixed on Lily's letter, now carefully placed in a leather folder on the desk. He thought of his vast fortune, the assets spread across continents, the ease with which he could move capital and influence markets, and, for the first time, he felt how poor he was. His wealth was material, cold, incapable of filling the void he hadn't even known he carried. Anna, with her simplicity and her cloth tote bag, possessed a far greater wealth, a richness of spirit, of empathy, of a wisdom not taught in business schools. He made a decision. He would no longer bow to the pressures. He would protect this small universe of affection that Anna was building, even if it meant declaring war on the world. Meanwhile, in her room, Anna felt the weight of the mansion. Richard's kindness had touched her, but with every corridor she crossed, she felt the discreet glances of the other employees. They weren't hostile, but they carried a curiosity that made her feel like a fish out of water. She sat on the bed, the soft fabric a stark contrast to the roughness of everything she had ever known, and remembered her past. She remembered how many times she had been judged for her simple clothes, how many doors had closed before she could say a word. That feeling of not belonging, of always being less than, was a ghost that haunted her. The joy over Lily's achievement was immense, but a treacherous voice whispered in her mind, "How long will this last? Soon they'll realize you're not good enough." The next morning, Richard woke with a new determination. He wasn't going to call Ms. Thompson. He was going to her. He would show her Lily's letter and prove that her methods were not just appropriate, they were miraculous. He put on his most imposing suit, the armor he wore for his toughest battles, and drove to the school. He felt invincible, moved by a conviction that no logical argument could shake. He walked into the headmistress's office unannounced, his heart pounding with a righteous fury. Miss Thompson looked at him, not with surprise, but with a calculated coldness. Before Richard could utter the first word of his rehearsed speech, she held up a sheet of letterhead. "Mr. Davenport, I'm glad you came," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "I've just formalized a report to Child Protective Services. We've received troubling accounts regarding Lily's emotional well-being and the influence of an unqualified person on her development. We need to ensure your daughter is in a safe environment." Mrs. Thompson's declaration fell on Richard like a slab of ice. The air in his lungs seemed to freeze, and the triumphant speech he had prepared died on his lips. A report. Child Protective Services. The words echoed in the lavish office, turning his righteous fury into a cold panic. He, Richard Davenport, the man whose life was a synonym for control and power, was being accused of neglecting his own daughter's well-being. It was an inversion so absurd, so surreal, that for a moment he felt completely disoriented. Lily's letter, which he held in the inner pocket of his jacket like a talisman, suddenly felt fragile and insufficient. He looked at the headmistress's impassive face and understood. This wasn't about Lily's welfare. It was a power play. She was using bureaucracy and prejudice as weapons to reassert her authority and punish him for daring to challenge her. "This is absurd," he managed to say, his voice hoarse, devoid of its usual strength. "Lily has never been happier, never been more developed. The person you call unqualified has done more for her in a few weeks than all of your specialists have in years." Ms. Thompson arched a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Happiness is a subjective concept, Mr. Davenport. Development is measured by metrics, by protocols that ensure a standard of excellence. Singing nursery rhymes and baking cookies do not fit into any of our pedagogical metrics. CPS will evaluate the situation and take appropriate action. Until then, the school strongly recommends the immediate dismissal of this caregiver." Every word was a calculated blow. She was cornering him, forcing him to choose between his family's reputation, his daughter's stability, and the woman who had performed a miracle. Richard left the school feeling hollowed out. The armor of the ruthless businessman had cracked, exposing the vulnerability of a terrified father. He drove aimlessly through the city streets, the silent engine of his luxury car a stark contrast to the storm in his mind. He thought of his financial empire, how he could mobilize the best lawyers in the country, how he could use his money and influence to crush this accusation. But he knew that in a battle like this, mud always splatters. His family's name would be dragged through the media, Lily's condition would be exposed and dissected by strangers, and Anna, the innocent in this whole affair, would have her life turned upside down. Fear paralyzed him. The instinct to protect his daughter at any cost, even if the cost was her happiness, began to scream louder. Maybe Ms. Thompson was right. Maybe he should just give in, fire Anna, and restore order, peace. A cold, silent peace, but a safe one. Meanwhile, at the mansion, Anna lived in a parallel universe of joy. Unaware of the gathering storm, she and Lily decided to prepare a surprise for Richard. They set up a small theater in the living room, with bedsheets serving as curtains. The show would be a recital of the alphabet. Lily, dressed like a princess in one of the party dresses she never wore, was radiant. For the first time, she didn't feel anxious about having to perform something. It was a game. With Anna's help, she had made large flashcards, each with a letter and a corresponding drawing. A with an apple, B with a ball, C with the heart she now drew perfectly. They rehearsed all day, between laughter and stumbles, their bond deepening with every moment. When Richard got home, night had already fallen. He walked in, dragging his feet, the weight of the world on his shoulders. The decision to fire Anna was made. A bitter taste of defeat and betrayal in his mouth. He would do it tonight. It would be quick, clinical. He'd offer a generous severance package, a sum that would solve any of her problems, and close this chapter. It was the only way. As he entered the living room, he found the lights dimmed, except for a single lamp illuminating the center of the room. And there they were, Lily holding Anna's hand, both with expectant smiles on their faces. "Daddy, you're home! We're ready for your surprise," the girl exclaimed, her voice full of contagious excitement. Richard looked at the scene, at the hanging sheets, at the colorful cards on the floor, and felt his heart break. He would have to destroy this little stage, turn off the lights on this happiness. The weight of this imminent cruelty crushed him, and for the first time in his adult life, he didn't know what to do. The woman he needed to fire to protect his family was the same one who was, at that very moment, teaching his daughter how to shine. Richard remained motionless, a ghost in his own home. The words of dismissal, cold and rehearsed, formed a lump in his throat. Before him, the scene was a portrait of pure innocence, an island of light in the ocean of his worries. He should interrupt, be the responsible adult, the businessman who cuts his losses before the damage is greater. But his feet seemed rooted to the floor. He couldn't move. He decided, in an act of both cowardice and tenderness, that he would watch the little play. It would be the last memory, the final glimpse of this ephemeral happiness before logic and fear took back control. He leaned against the doorframe, the darkness enveloping him, and nodded for them to begin. His heart was a painful liability on his emotional balance sheet. Anna smiled at Lily, a smile that seemed to say, "You've got this." The little girl took a deep breath, her small chest filling with courage, and held up the first card. On it was a capital A and a clumsy drawing of an angel. "A is for Anna," she said, looking at the nanny with an adoration that made Richard's heart contract. "And for Angel." She moved to the next. A D next to a stick figure wearing a tie. "D is for Daddy." And then she held up the card with the letter R. R is for Richard. She wasn't just reciting the alphabet. She was telling the story of her small world, reordering the universe around the people she loved. Richard felt the first crack in his resolve. Every letter she pronounced was a blow to his armor. He wasn't seeing an inappropriate method. He was witnessing the purest and most effective form of learning, the kind that is born from affection. The show continued. Lily stumbled over a few words, looking to Anna for support, but her confidence grew with each card she held up. She was a little star shining on the makeshift stage of her living room. At the end, she picked up the sheet of paper she had written on earlier, the one Richard now considered the most valuable document in his entire portfolio. Her voice a little shaky but clear as a bell, she read aloud, "I love you, Daddy. Thank you for being so amazing." And then she gave a clumsy curtsy, her cheeks flushed with pride. In that moment, Richard's dam broke. The logic, the fear, the social pressure, Ms. Thompson's threat, it was all swept away by an overwhelming wave of love and clarity. He realized that the biggest risk wasn't facing Child Protective Services. The biggest risk was losing this, losing the light in his daughter's eyes. Firing Anna wouldn't be an act of protection. It would be an amputation. He would fight. He would fight with all his money, with all his influence, with all his strength, for this woman and the miracle she was performing. With his heart overflowing and his decision made, he stepped out of the darkness, a genuine smile forming on his face for the first time that day. He applauded, the sound echoing through the room. "That was the most beautiful show I've ever seen in my life," he said, his voice full of an emotion he made no effort to hide. Lily ran to him and he lifted her into his arms, spinning her in the air. Anna watched, her eyes shining with happiness. It was a perfect moment, a snapshot of the family they could be. It was then that the shrill sound of the doorbell tore through the scene's harmony, sharp and insistent. The sound felt profane, an invasion. The assistant, Clara, appeared at the living room door, her face pale and her eyes wide with nervousness. "Sir, there are 2 people here. They say they're from Child Protective Services. They want to speak with you about an anonymous report." Richard's world, built on the premise that money and power were the solution to everything, crumbled with the arrival of those 2 serious-faced figures. They were a man and a woman, dressed in functional clothes that seemed oblivious to the mansion's luxury. The woman, older, introduced herself as Mrs. Davis. Her eyes were sharp and her face was a mask of impenetrable professionalism. The man, younger, named David, remained silent, but his gaze was attentive, absorbing every detail of the environment and the tension that hung in the air. Richard felt a primitive urge to call his army of lawyers, to turn this into a legal battle where his vast financial resources would guarantee victory. But looking at Lily, who had shrunk behind Anna, and at the nanny's pale face, he knew this was a war that couldn't be won with capital, but with truth. He led them to the living room, the makeshift stage from Lily's recital now looking like a piece of evidence. He asked Anna and Lily to stay. "Everything concerning my daughter concerns them too," he declared, his voice firm, challenging the silent authority of the visitors. Mrs. Davis perched on the edge of a velvet armchair, opening a notepad. "Mr. Davenport, we've received a report alleging that your daughter is being cared for by a person without the necessary qualifications, and that this is causing emotional instability and confusion in her development. We are here to ascertain the facts." The formality of the words was cold, cutting. Richard felt his blood boil. He, who managed a net worth of billions, who was a revered multimillionaire in the business world, was being treated like an irresponsible father in his own home. Instability, confusion, he repeated, disbelief coloring his voice. "My daughter, for the first time in her life, is blossoming. She is learning, she is smiling, she is communicating, and that is entirely due to Miss Anna." He turned to Anna, who remained standing, holding Lily's hand tightly. She looked like a frightened bird, ready to fly at the slightest sign of danger. She felt the weight of all her fears coming true. The humiliation, the feeling of being inadequate, it all came rushing back with overwhelming force. Her eyes met Richard's, and what she saw surprised her. There was no accusation or disappointment. There was a protective fury, an unexpected alliance. He was fighting for her. Mrs. Davis, however, was unmoved. "We understand your emotional attachment, sir, but we need facts, evidence. What is Miss Anna's educational background? What pedagogical methods does she use?" Richard laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Her method is affection. Her background is humanity, something all of your specialists with their expensive degrees failed to offer." He took Lily's letter from his pocket and handed it to the social worker. "Is this evidence? My daughter wrote this 2 days ago. Before Anna came, she could barely hold a pencil." Mrs. Davis analyzed the paper, impassive. David, her younger colleague, leaned in to see, and a flicker of something that looked like admiration crossed his face. The interview dragged on for nearly an hour, a subtle and draining interrogation. Lily, sensing the tension, began to cry softly, hiding her face in Anna's dress. That sound seemed to break everyone's composure. David cleared his throat. "Helen, perhaps we should—" Mrs. Davis silenced him with a look and stood up. Her decision seemed to have been made. "Mr. Davenport, the letter is indeed remarkable progress. However, the report is serious, and we cannot ignore it." Richard's heart sank. He had failed. "Given the circumstances, we will not take any drastic measures for now. Miss Anna may continue her work." A sigh of relief swept through the room, but Mrs. Davis wasn't finished. "However, there is one condition. We require that her methods be evaluated by a child psychologist from our department. He will observe the interaction and provide us with a technical report. It's the only way to ensure the child's well-being is, in fact, being prioritized. Richard nodded, willing to accept anything. And to ensure complete impartiality during the evaluation period, she added, her voice falling like the blade of a guillotine. The daily supervision cannot be conducted by you. The condition imposed by Mrs. Davis was a masterstroke, a strategic move that Richard, a master of negotiation, didn't see coming. He was being removed from the epicenter of his daughter's life at the most crucial moment. The idea of a stranger, a bureaucrat with a rule book, watching every gesture of Anna's, every laugh of Lily's, was unbearable. It was an invasion, a violation of the sanctuary of affection they had built. Worse, the demand for his removal placed him in a position of powerlessness. He, who controlled boards of directors and influenced the cash flow of corporations, couldn't even supervise the well-being of his own daughter. He felt like a king exiled from his own kingdom. The decision, however, was non-negotiable. It was either accept or risk losing Anna for good. With a heavy heart, he agreed. The following days were a slow torture. The appointed psychologist, Dr. Evans, was a middle-aged man with a weary air and a gaze that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 problem cases. He would install himself in an armchair in the corner of the playroom, with his notepad, observing in silence. His presence was a grey cloud hanging over the sun Anna had brought. The games, once spontaneous, now felt like performances. Lily's laughter sounded a bit more subdued, as if she sensed the weight of that clinical stare. Anna, for her part, struggled to maintain her naturalness. Every gesture, every song, every hug seemed to be judged, measured, and weighed. The ghost of inadequacy, which she had fought so hard to silence, returned to haunt her. She felt naked under that scrutiny, her intuition and affection being dissected as if they were anomalies to be studied. For Richard, the situation was even worse. He followed the order strictly, leaving earlier for the office and returning only when he knew Dr. Evans had already left. The mansion, which had started to feel like a home, reverted to being a cold, strange space. He received daily reports from his assistant, Clara, but her words were just a pale summary of reality. He yearned for the sounds, the laughter, the sight of Lily running to hug him with paint-smeared hands. The silence that greeted him every evening was a constant reminder of his impotence. Managing his business, once a passion, became an empty distraction. What was the point of accumulating more wealth, more assets, if he was being deprived of the only profit that truly mattered? One afternoon, unable to bear the distance, he broke protocol. He returned home early, parking the car far from the main entrance and slipping in through the back like a thief in his own house. He climbed the stairs silently and paused in the hallway, where he could hear the voices from the playroom without being seen. He heard Dr. Evans' monotonous voice. "Miss Anna, don't you think the excessive use of playful stimuli could create a dependency on instant gratification, rather than developing the resilience needed for more arid tasks?" Richard felt his blood rise. It was the cold language of bureaucracy trying to dissect magic. He waited for Anna's reply, imagining she would be intimidated, perhaps speechless, but her voice, when it came, was calm and firm. "Doctor, with all due respect, I don't see learning as an arid task. I see it as a discovery. Lily isn't dependent on gratification. She's motivated by affection. When she learns a new letter, she's not seeking a prize. She's seeking to share an accomplishment with someone she loves. What you call playful stimuli, I call joy. And as far as I know, there's nothing wrong with learning with joy." There was a moment of silence. Richard could picture the psychologist's surprised face. He felt a wave of pride so intense it almost made him lose his balance. Anna wasn't just caring for his daughter, she was defending her. She was defending Lily's right to be a child. At that moment, something inside him shifted. The admiration he felt for her, once diffuse and uncertain, began to take the shape of something deeper, more personal. He no longer saw just his daughter's nanny. He saw a woman of extraordinary strength and wisdom. The realization hit him with the force of a punch. He was falling in love with her, and that realization terrified him more than any report or psychological evaluation. The revelation fell upon Richard with the weight of an undeniable truth: love. It was a word he associated with unnecessary risks, with emotional liabilities that could compromise the stability of his portfolio. In his world, relationships were like mergers and acquisitions, calculated, strategic, based on compatibility of status and goals. He had been with women from his social circle, women who understood the language of dividends and mutual funds, but none had ever made him feel that dizzying mix of admiration, protectiveness, and an overwhelming desire to simply be near. Anna was the opposite of everything he had ever considered suitable. She was humble, had no financial ambitions, and her greatest wealth was her capacity for unconditional love. And that was exactly what drew him in, what dismantled him. He felt like an investor before a new, volatile cryptocurrency, fascinated, lured by the potential for immense returns, but terrified of the unknown risk. This new awareness made the distance even more unbearable. Every night, returning to the silent mansion, he searched for traces of her. A children's storybook left on the sofa, the faint scent of cinnamon rolls still in the air, a drawing by Lily taped to the refrigerator. They were small signs that life was still vibrant there, despite his absence. He began to feel like a spectator to his own happiness. Dinners, once formal affairs, became the highlight of his day. Dr. Evans left in the late afternoon, and for a few hours, the makeshift family could breathe. He watched the interaction between Anna and Lily, the way Anna cut the girl's food into small pieces, how she told stories to get her to eat her vegetables. They were simple, everyday gestures, but to Richard, they seemed like miracles. He found himself asking Anna about her day, not out of formality, but genuine interest. He wanted to know about her conversations with the psychologist, about the new letters Lily had learned, about the small triumphs and frustrations, and in her answers, he saw not just the nanny, but the woman, a woman of quiet resilience and a dignity that shamed the luxury around her. The approach, however, was a minefield. Anna, for her part, sensed the change in Richard's behavior. His gazes lingered a little longer. His questions were more personal. She felt an electric current in the air when he was near, something that made her nervous and, to her own confusion, strangely happy. But the voice of insecurity was loud. She was the employee, he the billionaire employer. The social chasm between them was an ocean. She interpreted his kindness as gratitude, his attention as a father's natural concern. To allow herself to think it could be something more was a path to heartbreak. She had already learned the hard way that worlds like his didn't open up for people like her. So she closed herself off, maintaining a professional distance, answering his questions politely but without opening up. This dynamic of approach and retreat created a delicate tension, a ballet of unsaid emotions that hovered over the house. The turning point came unexpectedly. One night, a violent thunderstorm broke over the city, with thunder that made the mansion's windows rattle. Lily, who had always been terrified of storms, woke up screaming. Richard rushed to her room, but nothing he said could calm her. She cried, trembling with fear, calling for one person, Anna. Anna, who had been sleeping in a guest room since the evaluation began, appeared at the door, her face sleepy, wearing simple pajamas. Without hesitation, she sat on the bed and hugged the girl. She began to hum a lullaby, the same soft melody Richard had heard so many times. She didn't tell Lily not to be afraid. She said, "I'm right here with you. The thunder is just the sky snoring because it's sleepy. Just like us." Richard stood frozen in the doorway, watching. Anna's calm was like a balm, and slowly Lily's sobs subsided. Her breathing evened out, and she fell asleep, safe in the nanny's arms. Anna made a move to get up, but Richard stopped her with a gesture. "Let her sleep," he whispered. He came closer and, with a gentleness he didn't know he possessed, he adjusted the blanket over them both. His fingers brushed against Anna's hand, and the contact, brief and accidental, was like an electric shock. They looked at each other in the darkness, the sound of the rain serving as the soundtrack to this moment of forced intimacy. "Thank you," he said, and the word, this time, carried the weight of everything he felt. "You're amazing." Anna felt her face flush. The wall she had built around her heart began to crumble. In that dark room, he wasn't the boss, and she wasn't the employee. They were just two people sharing a concern, a tenderness. It was then that the door opened with a soft click. A female silhouette stood there. It was Veronica, Richard's ex-girlfriend, a socialite whose beauty was as stunning as her reputation was predatory. Her eyes, sharp as shards of glass, scanned the scene with a contemptuous smile. "Richard, darling, I see you've been hiring rather versatile help." Veronica's appearance was like tossing a lit match into a powder keg. Her voice, laced with a sweet venom, shattered the sanctity of that moment in Lily's room. Richard straightened up, the tenderness in his expression replaced by a mask of coldness. Her presence in his house, especially at this time of night, was a calculated invasion, a power play he knew all too well. Veronica belonged to his past, to a world of appearances and business deals disguised as romance. They had broken up over a year ago, but she had never fully accepted the loss of access to his status and, more importantly, his fortune. Seeing her there, with that mocking smile, made Richard realize that the storm outside was nothing compared to the one about to erupt inside his home. "Veronica, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. He moved to stand between her and the bed, an instinctive gesture to shield Anna and Lily from her predatory gaze. Veronica shrugged, a studied movement to make her designer coat fall perfectly over her shoulders. "The door was unlocked, darling. And I know you keep a spare key under the fern pot, a habit you really should change." She strolled into the room, ignoring Anna's presence as if she were part of the furniture. Her eyes swept over the child's room and landed on Richard with feigned concern. "I heard about your troubles, the school, CPS. The billionaire world is a fishbowl, Richard. We all know everything. I came to offer my help." Anna felt the air grow thin. She shrank back on the bed, wishing she could become invisible. The woman before her was everything she was not: confident, polished, dressed in the value of a small car. And the look Veronica shot her, a quick, cutting glance, said it all. It said poor, insignificant, opportunist. It was the same look she had received her entire life. The instinct to flee screamed inside her. Richard, sensing Anna's discomfort, tried to end the conversation. "I don't need your help, Veronica. The situation is under control." Veronica laughed, a sound both crystalline and cruel. "Under control. Richard, please. The word is that you've handed over your daughter's education, the heiress to your entire fortune, to some neighborhood nanny, that she's using folk remedies and spinning her little web around you. Don't you see how this affects your image? Your business? Davenport Corp stock dropped 2 points today. People are talking. They think you've lost your mind." Every word was a precision strike, aimed at the pillars of Richard's world: image, business, stock prices. Veronica was a master of manipulation. She knew exactly where to apply pressure. "Fire her." "Richard," she said, her voice now a conspiratorial whisper, "it's the only way. I can help you. I know the director at the agency. One call from me, a generous donation to the right charity, and all of this disappears. We can say it was a lapse, an error in judgment, and then we can restore order, the two of us, as a family." She moved closer to him, touching his arm. The gesture was intimate, possessive. She was offering him an easy way out. A return to the world he knew in exchange for Anna's head on a platter. Anna, hearing this, felt her heart turn to stone. "Spinning her little web around you." The insinuation was clear and poisonous. She was a gold digger, interested only in his money. The humiliation was so intense, it suffocated her. It was the final accusation, the materialization of all her fears. She couldn't stay there any longer. With a careful movement so as not to wake Lily, she stood up. Her eyes met Richard's for a second. In them, she saw a whirlwind of emotions, anger, conflict, but also hesitation. And that hesitation was the final straw. He was considering it, the possibility, however small, that he might believe those words, broke her. Without a word, she walked past Veronica and out of the room, down the luxurious hallways that were never her place. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she had to get out of there. Out of that house, out of that life that wasn't hers. She had to escape before her heart, already in 1,000 pieces, was completely crushed. Anna's silent departure from the room was like the snap of a twig before an avalanche. Richard felt her leave on a visceral level, a sudden absence that left him hollow. He shrugged off Veronica's touch with a brusqueness that surprised her. "Enough, Veronica. It's over. Get out." His tone left no room for argument. The hesitation Anna thought she had seen in his eyes wasn't doubt about her, but the paralyzing shock of seeing the ugliness of his old world invade the purity of his new one. He saw with perfect clarity the crossroads he was at. On one side, the easy path, paved with money and appearances, offered by Veronica. On the other, the uncertain and difficult path, but the one that led to the only thing that had proven real in his life. And he knew, with a certainty that transcended any investment risk analysis, which path he had to take, but it was too late. When he rushed into the hallway, it was empty. He went to the guest room. The door was open, the bed untouched. On the pillow lay a single, folded piece of paper. It wasn't the expensive, letter-headed stationery of the mansion, but a simple sheet from the drawing pad she used with Lily. His heart hammered against his ribs as he unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, almost childlike. "Mr. Davenport, thank you for the opportunity. Lily is the most special girl I have ever met. Please tell her I love her and that I will never forget her. Goodbye, Anna." There was no accusation, no anger, just a quiet dignity and a deep sadness that seemed to bleed from the paper. The word goodbye hit him like a fist. He had allowed the darkness to enter, and in doing so, had extinguished his only light. The next morning, the mansion plunged into a silence heavier and more oppressive than ever before. Lily woke up and the first word she said was, "Anna." When she couldn't find her, a crisis ensued. It wasn't a child's ordinary cry. It was a deep lament, a sob that came from the soul. She refused to eat, to get dressed, to leave her bed. She pushed away the breakfast plate that Clara, the assistant, tried to offer. "I want Anna," she screamed, her face swollen and red from crying. Richard tried to approach her, but she pushed him away. "You let her go. You let the mean lady fight with her. I saw you." The accusation, coming from his own daughter, was the most severe punishment he could ever receive. He was the one to blame. His weakness, his momentary paralysis, had cost him his daughter's happiness. The days that followed were a dive into despair. A sense of all is lost had settled in relentlessly. Richard tried everything. He hired a private investigation agency to find Anna, but she seemed to have vanished. The address on her file was old. The neighbors hadn't seen her in months. He drove through the working-class neighborhoods she might have come from himself. a man in a luxury car completely out of place, asking for her in diners and small shops, showing her picture. No one knew her. It was as if she had been an angel who had landed in his life and left without a trace. Her absence was a black hole that sucked all the joy from the house. Dr. Evans's report arrived, surprisingly positive, praising Lily's strong, effective bonds and remarkable cognitive progress. But the document was useless now. The report to CPS was withdrawn, thanks to a discreet intervention by his lawyers, but the victory tasted like ashes. He had won the battle but lost the war. One night, exhausted and hopeless, he went into Lily's room. She was asleep, but her sleep was fitful. Next to her bed, on the small desk, lay a piece of paper and a pencil. He picked it up, expecting to see another sad drawing. But it wasn't a drawing, it was words. In handwriting that was still hesitant but driven by a desperate need, Lily had written a new sentence. The longest and most complex she had ever managed on her own. 4 words that were a plea, a command, and the last spark of hope he had left. Richard read them, and the tears he had been holding back for days finally came. A flood of regret and pain. On the page, the plea of a child who understood more about love than he ever had. Bring her back, Daddy. Those words became his compass, the strength he needed to get back up and face his own cowardice. He would no longer search for her as an employer looking for an employee. He would search for her as a man searching for the missing half of his soul. Those 4 words, written by his daughter's hand, became Richard's true north. He called off the private investigators and dismissed his assistants from the search. This was not a task that could be delegated. It was a personal pilgrimage he had to undertake. He began to frequent the neighborhood Anna had come from, no longer as an outsider in a luxury car, but on foot. He had his driver drop him miles away and would walk the simple streets, observing, feeling the pulse of the community. He started to understand that Anna wasn't from a place, but from a people. Her strength came from those roots, from those human connections that he, in his ivory tower, had never cultivated. He was no longer looking for a woman in hiding. He was looking for a woman who served. And it was this change in perspective that led him to the door of a small community center. Inside, between peeling walls and the smell of brewed coffee, he saw a flyer announcing the annual neighborhood block party, an event to raise funds for the local daycare. Among the names of the organizers, one made him stop: Anna Miller. His heart leapt. He spoke to a kind older woman serving coffee and, with a humility he didn't know he possessed, asked about her. The woman smiled. "Our Anna, she's an angel in our lives. Since she came back, she hasn't stopped for a minute. She's organizing the whole kids' corner for the party tonight." Richard thanked her, hope, for the first time in weeks, flooding his chest. He knew what he had to do. This wouldn't be a private conversation in an office. It had to be here, in her world, where she was strong and he was vulnerable. That evening, he arrived at the party. The square was filled with lights, music, and the sound of laughter. Families strolled by, children ran around with cotton candy. It was a universe of a richness his net worth couldn't measure. For a moment, he felt like an intruder, a man in a grey suit in a sea of vibrant color. Then he saw her. In an area set slightly apart, under a tent lit by colorful string lights, she sat on a low chair, surrounded by a small circle of attentive children. She wasn't teaching the alphabet, but telling a story, using sock puppets she must have made herself. Her face was illuminated by a serene, genuine joy. She was home, she was whole, and the sight of her, so complete without him, hit him with the force of a revelation. He didn't love her because he needed her. He needed her because he loved her. He approached slowly, his heart beating uncontrollably. The children saw him first and fell silent. Anna looked up, and her smile vanished. replaced by an expression of shock and pain. She stood up, the instinct to protect herself, to flee, written in her eyes. But Richard was faster, before her, before the children, and before the curious gazes of onlookers. The man who commanded empires and never bowed to anyone knelt on the grass. A murmur went through the small crowd. "Anna," he began, his voice choked. The tears he didn't know he still had streaming down his face. "I was a fool, a coward. I let the poison of my world contaminate ours, and I lost everything that matters." He pulled Lily's crumpled note from his pocket. "I didn't come here to offer you a job. I came to beg you to come back to our family, because that's what we are." He looked up at her, his soul laid bare. "All my fortune, all my capital, my businesses, none of it is worth a single one of your smiles. I don't want to hire you, Anna. I want to share my life with you. I want you to help me raise our daughter. I want to fill that house with laughter and the smell of cookies every day. I love you." The declaration hung in the air, sincere and devastating. Anna looked back at him, tears streaming down her own face, washing away the pain and humiliation, and in a gesture that silenced the world around them, she reached out her hand and helped him to his feet. The sun was finally breaking through the storm. The return to the mansion was not a return, but a re-founding. Anna didn't enter through the back door as an employee, but through the front door, hand in hand with Richard and Lily, as the matriarch of a newly discovered home. The transformation of the space was immediate and profound. The walls that once echoed with silence now absorbed the sound of laughter and lively conversation. The smell of floor wax was replaced by the aroma of cinnamon rolls baking in the oven, a recipe from Anna's grandmother that became a house favorite. The cold hallways, once galleries of sterile luxury, became the exhibition space for Lily's colorful drawings, which were changed weekly and celebrated as masterpieces. Richard's fortune, once visible only in the expensive furniture and impersonal art, now manifested in the abundance of life that pulsed in every room. That house, which for so long had been just a collection of assets on his balance sheet, had finally become a home. They did face the whispers and sideways glances of high society. Veronica and others like her tried to paint the union as a scandal, a stain on Richard Davenport's impeccable reputation. But he, who once would have cared about the impact on his stock prices, now smiled at such gossip. His armor was no longer an expensive suit, but the certainty of the love that awaited him at home. With Anna's support, he made the decision to pull Lily from Ms. Thompson's elite school, enrolling her in a smaller, more welcoming institution that celebrated creativity and learning through affection. He used his vast capital not to impress, but to build an environment where his daughter could flourish at her own pace, free from judgment and cruel metrics. He discovered that the best investment of his life hadn't been in crypto or treasury bonds, but in his family's happiness. The long-awaited romantic justice didn't come in the form of a lavish wedding or a priceless jewel. It revealed itself in small, daily gestures. It happened when Richard came home and, instead of locking himself in his office, lay on the living room rug so Lily could read to him. The girl's voice, now firm and full of confidence. It happened when he watched Anna in the garden, teaching Lily how to plant sunflowers, both of their hands dirty with soil, and felt a peace that no prophet had ever given him. He, the man who once lived to accumulate, now lived to share. He learned that true wealth wasn't stored in vaults or expressed in dollars and euros, but in the building of memories, the sharing of a long breakfast, the warmth of a hug at the end of a difficult day. One sunny afternoon, months later, Richard was in his former office, now transformed into a family library. He watched through the window as Anna and Lily sat under the shade of a blooming dogwood tree, reading a book together, their heads tilted in the same direction. The setting sun cast a golden light on the scene, and Richard felt a wave of gratitude so powerful it left him breathless. The shy, insecure girl had transformed into a radiant child. The cold mansion was now a haven of love, and he, the man who had everything but possessed nothing, had finally found his greatest treasure. He understood that the most important net worth wasn't financial, but emotional. The love that Anna and Lily gave him was the highest dividend he would ever receive, a cash flow of happiness that would never cease. The home they built together was his inheritance, his legacy, the proof that the greatest fortune of all is, and always will be, the capacity to love and be loved.